Hey there, you fabulous folks. I hope your day has been absolutely awesome. We're back for another exciting episode of What If Naruto Was the Golden Devil. A big shout out to the amazing author behind this fanfiction and show them some love. You'll find their details in the description box below. If this what if scenario is getting your imagination going, drop a comment down below and share your thoughts. And don't forget to explore more mind-blowing what ifs on the channel. Alright, without further ado, let's jump right into this video. "Excuse me, Bucho," Issei called out hesitantly as he and the other members of the Occult Research Club followed the buxom redhead down a path leading away from their building. It had been almost 3 weeks since their battle with Kokabile and Naruto's recovery and Zenovia's decision to join Ria's peerage. One of the first things the reincarnated blue-haired knight had done was apologize to Asya for her actions, to which the blonde healer accepted with a smile. "Yes, Issei," Ria's replied back with a stiff tone, making Issei flinch slightly. The reason he was being so cautious was because he had told Rias some shocking news regarding one of his recent clients. It turned out that the man that had been summoning him was the Governor General of the Fallen Angels himself, Azazel. To put it bluntly, Rias was not taking the news well, even more so since apparently Naruto was made aware of this before their battle with Kokabile and didn't tell her. Swallowing the mucus stuck in his throat, Issei shook his head a few times before speaking. Why are we heading this way? I didn't think there is anything beyond this point." "Well, it isn't popularly known, but there is another building similar to ours a little ways ahead. We are heading there because Naruto-kun has gotten approval to set up his headquarters there," Rias explained while keeping her eyes focused on the road in front of her. "He has his own headquarters. Why would Naruto-senpai have his own when you and he are engaged?" Issei tilted his head slightly in confusion. Bucho and Naruto-kun came to an agreement that it's better for them to each have their own headquarters. But at the same time, they will have no problems interacting with each other whenever they want. Akeno explained in Ria's stead, turning attention to her. "From what I understand, Naruto-kun doesn't want Bucho to feel like she is obligated to give him control over her peerage and everything despite the fact that they are getting married." "That does sound like him. Naruto-san has always been like that in regards to the feelings of others," Kiba said as he and Koneko walked on either side of Issei, the petite girl nodding her head in agreement. "Naruto Lucifer is a real mystery," Zenovia commented as she crossed her arms under her bust. "From what I've read regarding Lucifer and his clan, they were said to be the most malicious out of the 4 great clans. But going by what I've seen, he isn't like that at all. But that's a good thing, right?" Issei raised a hand to scratch his cheek. "Naruto-senpai said it himself that he wants to break away from his clan's past and create a new one." "I suppose so. By the way, where is Asya?" "Is she already there?" Zenovia questioned as she glanced back at Issei, who nodded his head. Rias was the one to speak, however, as she caught sight of a building in the distance. She and Maito-chan already went ahead to see the place. They are his sisters after all. Once every got close to the building, they took in its appearance, and from a first glance they could see that the exterior had a similar design to their own headquarters. The only real difference between them was that the trees were more spread out around the building, and instead of the clock tower that they had on their roof, this building's roof had 2 small rooftop observation decks that looked like it could fit 2 or 3 people at a time. After a few more moments of taking in the building's appearance, the sound of the door opening made the group's attention move towards the entrance to see Arcuid poking her head through the door. Another head popped out under hers, this one belonging to her familiar Len. "Hey there, how long you guys gonna stand out there?" Arcuid raised a hand out and motioned to the group to come closer, with Len mirroring her actions with a blank face. Come on, get inside already." "Oh, Arcuid, I take it everyone is inside," Rias called out as the group walked up to the entrance. Arcuid smiled brightly as she faced the redhead a mock salute. "That's right. Even Sona and Tsubaki showed up. Wow, it's hard to believe this is the same person who fought off Kokabile while securing the barrier." Issei muttered to himself before he watched as the top of Arcuid's hair popped up to resemble 2 cat-like ears and turned her head to look at him. "Crap, she heard me. There's nothing wrong with relaxing once in a while. People who are too serious in work all the time are no fun, and beside." Almost everyone was surprised when Arcuid disappeared from sight, making everyone besides Rias and Akeno look around for her. "I have complete control over my full power now, so I can afford to relax, unlike you." Issei blinked several times as he heard Arcuid's voice coming from above him, and looked up to see she was actually sitting on his shoulders, with one of her claws was inches from the brunette's eyes. "So fast, wait, how did you get there without me knowing?" "That was nothing. Arcuid replied as she jumped off Issei's shoulders and walked past him towards the building's entrance where Len was. In my old profession, I used to do stuff like that all the time, but unlike now, I wasn't at full power. Her profession, Kiba curiously repeated with a raised eyebrow, though Arcuid Simple walked into the building. Akeno brought a hand to her mouth and let out a laugh. That's right. Before she became Naruto's queen, Arcuid was an executioner of the church. Thanks to her being a true ancestor and her reputation, she was known as the White Princess. She used to be an executioner, Zenovia exclaimed in shock, but she wasn't the only one, as Kiba and Koneko both took a step back. The executioners were the branch of the church filled with heretic inquisitors, committing the bloodiest jobs that specialized in demon killing and destroying any trace of heretic beings. I don't understand. What's an executioner? Issei asked as Rias and Akeno walked into the building, before shrugging his shoulders as he figured that he would find out later. The rest of the orc headed inside after their king and queen and followed them down the hall where Arcuid and Len's figures could be seen entering a room. As the two continue through the building, Akeno let out a soft hymn. I have to admit, this place is impressive. It's almost an exact copy of our building Bucho. Yes, it does, though it looks like Naruto's main room is on the first floor. I wonder why, Rias wondered to herself as she and the others reached the double doors, and once they opened the doors they were in awe at what was inside. That is a lot of book, Issei exclaimed as he and the others looked around the room. The room itself actually 2 floor levels that had been connected by a spiral staircase along the back wall, and had several tables and couches at various points of the room. Off to the side of the room was an area desk that was similar to Ria's, with a single laptop on it. The entire upper levels seemed to have numerous rows of bookshelves covering almost the second floor, while the first floor had one large round table in the center of the room. They quickly took notice to Naruto talking to Sona and Tsubaki near his desk, while Arcuid and Len were sitting in one of the couches, though Asya and Nova were nowhere to be seen. Turning their heads towards the doors, Naruto and the 2 glasses-wearing girl took notice to their arrival. The Lucifer heir flashed them a smile as he raised a hand in greeting. Hey there, guy. Welcome to the Legends and Mythology Archives Club. So what do you think? This is really impressive, Kiba commented as he looked around the room in awe. An archives club, huh? I guess that would make sense with all the books, but what kind of cover does this club have? Rias asked as she and her group walked up to the table until they were standing around it. She had to admit the room was very impressive, though it seemed a little big for her tastes. Where did you get all these books? Believe it or not, this amount is actually connected to the Lucifer clan's library, and thanks to a spell that my grandmother can cast. It can bring you any book you want from there. The blonde explained with a smile before rubbing the back of his head. As for my cover story for my headquarters, this club focuses on investigating both legends and mythology that have been passed down through history and write reports on them. And thanks to the access I have to the clan's library, it will be easy for us to take care of it. Not to mention we can use this place as an actual archive when it comes to any situation we have to deal with in the future. It's amazing, Naruto-kun, Akeno commented as she smiled warmly at the male king. I suppose Avalon played a big part in the club's creation, Fufufu. I don't see any issue with that. Avalon's voice spoke up as she appeared in front of everyone in a flash of light. History is a powerful thing, and one can't be too careful with making sure it is not repeated. Sona let out an amused hum as she pushed up her glasses. Very true, Avalon. Perhaps we will take advantage of this place as well, if that is okay with you, Naruto. Nope, it's fine with me, Naruto replied with a smile and nod. So what brings you here, Sona? I don't suppose you came here just to celebrate the opening of Naruto's headquarters? Rias asked as she crossed her arms under her breasts, causing them to elevate and make them more pronounced. I was just discussing something with Naruto regarding a personal matter, but I suppose it can wait. That raised some eyebrows as Rias and several others turned their attention to Naruto, who avoided their stares while scratching his cheek awkwardly. Actually, Rias, there is something else I wish to— Rias-senpai. Hello, everyone. Everyone lifted their heads up to see an excited Mito bent over the railing, waving down at them while Asya was smiling down at them and trying to keep Mito secure so she wouldn't fall over. But to the visible surprise of Issei, Kiba, and Zenovia, and a silent one from Koneko, another familiar face watched up to the railing and leaned on it as he waved a hand at them. Good afternoon, I hope you all are doing well. Gawain called out to everyone below before jumping over the railing and landed in a crouched position in front of them. They quickly took notice to his new attire, which was the male uniform of Kuoh Academy. It's been a while. Gawain-senpai, Zenovia shouted in shock since she hadn't seen her fellow swordsman since Naruto had awoken from his recovery. I see you decided to stay here as well, Zenovia. Did Irina get on her flight all right? Gawain said as he walked up to the group, but he was quickly stopped as Asya came running up to him, though she took the stairs to get to him. Asya placed a hand on his shoulder as she looked up at him with a worried expression. You shouldn't jump over the rails like that, Gawain, you could get hurt. Don't worry, Asya, I'm fine. A little jump like that won't hurt me, Gawain replied as he smiled down at the girl, who continued to stare up at him with a pout. All right, I won't do that anymore when you're around. Good. Asya's pout quickly disappeared as a smile took its place, but once she turned her head away from Gawain, the teen let out a sigh. He could never say no to Asya when she made that face, even when they were kids back at the orphanage. Wait, hold on a second, Issei shouted as he pointed a finger at Gawain, who blinked innocently several times at the action. Just what are you doing here, Gawain? And why are you dressed up like that? Hey Issei, Naruto's voice called out, making the brunette freeze as a familiar tingle went up his spine before he slowly, and very hesitantly, cranked his head to look at the blonde Lucifer, only to let out a yelp as the Hanya mask that zoomed in on his face. A purplish aura oozed out of Naruto's body, as shadows seemed to cover most of the upper half of his face, leaving 2 glowing eyes remaining. I don't appreciate you raising your voice like that at my knight, so please control yourself when you are here. Issei let out a whimper as he nodded his head, which made the mask and the aura around Naruto disappear in an instant as he smiled at the pawn. Glad to see that you understand. Riaz released a breath she didn't realize she was holding. I will never get used to that. Miya-san was truly a sadist to teach you that, Naruto-kun. Such a frightening technique, Zenovia thought to herself as she felt a few beads of sweat fall down her cheek. I didn't even feel any killer intent. Maybe I should learn that technique / I hope Naruto-kun teaches me how to do that. Sona and Akeno thought as their interest on learning how Naruto did that peaked. Behind both of them, Koneko had moved over to sit next to Arcuid, and Len in an attempt to get as far away from the Hanya mask as possible, while Tsubaki had taken a step back with a gulp. Kiba couldn't help but shiver as he too felt a tingle go up his spine, before shaking his head as he recalled what Naruto had just said. Wait, did you just say? That's right. Naruto grinned as he turned to face the others. I used one of my knight pieces to resurrect Gawain into a devil. As of now, he is the second one to join my peerage. It wasn't as if I was going to do anything else. My situation is similar to Zenovia's after all, Gawain explained as he bowed his head towards the rest of Ria's peerage. I hope we can all get along well in the future. His words seemed to open up the conversation between them all as everyone besides the kings and queens in the room walked closer to Naruto's knight. As Naruto watched Gawain start to interact with the group, he couldn't help but think back to when Gawain had asked him to become a devil, and the secret that he had revealed to him at the same time. Flashback, you want to join my peerage, Naruto said as he stared at Gawain, who was sitting on the couch across from him. The 2 blondes were the only ones sitting down as Asya, Riaz, Akeno, and Arcuid were standing off to the side. Asya had a worried look on her face as she watched her brother and childhood friend, while the other 3 were silently studying the 2. Gawain nodded his head. I apologize for bringing this up only a day after your recovery, but I thought it would be better to discuss this with you as soon as possible. Zenovia should have joined Ria's peerage, correct? That's right, Riaz spoke up as she placed a hand on her hip. From what she told me, both you and she were excommunicated from the church. Yes. I can only imagine it has to do with her discovery of God being dead. Her discovery? Naruto blinked a few times in confusion as he processed what Gawain had said. Does that mean you knew the whole time? Everyone watched as Gawain closed his eyes for a few moments before opening them. I had my suspicions for a while now, and to be honest it explained some things, but that doesn't matter now. What is your answer, Naruto? Having the Excalibur Galatine in my arsenal would be amazing, especially since it ties with the Durandal in strength. Naruto crossed his arms as he spoke. I have to ask though, why do you want to join my peerage? It was partially my fault on what happened to you both. Asya has told me stories about what you have gone through in the short time you have been exposed to the supernatural world. After seeing you in action and judging you for myself, I can see that you are an honorable man who fights to protect those precious to him. Gawain explained as he gaze drifted to Avalon, who was floating in the air next to Naruto's head, before turning his attention back to the Lucifer air. Despite the fact that you are a devil, I can see that you are worthy of Excalibur and Avalon, and just like my ancestor, serving under the wielder of Excalibur would be a great honor of itself. Your ancestor. Are you saying that you descend from one of the knights of the Round Table? Avalon called out in surprise as her eyes widened. That would explain how you were able to wield Excalibur Galatine, not to mention your name. That's right, I am the descendant of Sir Gawain, White Knight of the Sun. Honestly, I wasn't made aware of the connection I had with my ancestor or my familial origin until after I was given Excalibur Galatine and the awakening of my powers. Taking notice to the tone in his voice when he said that, Akeno's eyes narrowed as she saw one of Gawain's hands grip tightly onto his knee pants. Now that you mention it, I did sense something off about you when we first met, and then again when I say you actually holding Excalibur Galatine. But I dismissed it both of those times because I thought it was due to your holy swords and strong light affinity. Naruto said as he leaned forward a bit, so is there some other power you have besides your sword? Everyone was surprised to see Gawain suddenly tense up and sat there in silence for several minutes before he slowly stood up and started to remove his jacket. Naruto said nothing as he was a little confused at the man's actions, but decided to wait until Gawain finished what he was doing. Arcuit and Rias watched the man's actions with calculative gazes as they started to figure out what Gawain was talking about, while Akeno seemed to freeze up as a look of shock grew on her face. Gawain, what are you doing? A red-faced Asya exclaimed as she brought her hands her cheeks, her eyes drifting down a bit to Gawain's slightly muscle. Asya quickly shook her head several times to clear her mind. Why am I thinking about Gawain like that? Oh Lord, please H. And here comes the headache. Gawain seemed to pause in his actions as he glanced at Asya for a few seconds before bowing his head. I'm sorry that you have to see this, Asya. Closing his eyes, Gawain started to focus. And almost instantly the room had white feathers floating in the air and a small light emitting from the center of the room. Gawain, you're an angel, Naruto said as he stared at the two white feathered wings coming from Gawain's back and a small halo hovering over his head. Not exactly. After my ancestor Gawain had passed, one of his descendants, who happened to be my grandfather, had fallen in love with an angel. The two of them loved each other dearly and had gotten married and eventually had a child together. Gawain started to explain, but was soon interrupted as Rias spoke up. But I thought it was impossible for angels to have sex, since it could lead to them falling. That is only if they give in to temptation and their impure desires. It is actually very possible for them to do it. Though from what I've heard, it is a process that can take hours as the angel must purify themselves when making love, and both the angel and her partner must undergo a lengthy purification ritual. A specially crafted barrier must be created around them as well, and neither can harbor any kind of possessive feelings while doing it. Rather, it must be done out of pure love. Gawain clarified before continuing his story. But going back on topic, the two of them had a child that was unlike any had seen in centuries. That child was half angel and half human, right? Akeno said, making Gawain nod his head in confirmation. Though Naruto quickly took notice to the voluptuous girl's body was trembling despite the calm expression she was trying to present. Akeno-chan, Naruto's voice seemed to snap Akeno out of her thoughts as she turned her head towards the Lucifer air and saw he was looking at her with concern. Are you okay? I'm perfectly fine. Let's just have Gawain-san finish his story. Maybe I should get us some tea. With that said, the orc's vice president hurriedly made her way out of the room, gaining a look of concern from Naruto and Asya, while Rias looked down to the floor with a melancholy expression. It must be hard for you to hear this, Akeno, Rias thought to herself as concern for her best friend grew inside her. Gawain stared at the closed door for a few seconds before turning his attention back to Naruto. It was because this child was born of a specific angel that some called for the death of it and my grandparents, which they succeeded in doing with the latter. But luckily they had come up with a plan in which to keep their child safe and left it with a fellow angel that they could trust to keep it safe. Generations passed and soon I was born one-fourth angel, but even then I was left alone due to my parents dying when I was a baby. And that's when you came to my orphanage. Asya finished as she felt tears build up in her eyes. Yeah, apparently the angel kept his word and watched over my family. That cross I gave you, Asya, did belong to my mother, like I said, and it was the only thing left after they died. The halo over Gawain's head faded away, and his wings folded in behind his back as the blonde sat back down. He was the one who dropped me off at the orphanage and left me the cross. And after I became a holy sword user of the church, he appeared before me to bequeath Excalibur Galatine to me and tell me the truth of what I am. The possibility of you joining the angel faction with you being excommunicated is very low, not to mention you're half angel. Have you seen this sort of situation before, Arcuid? Crossing her arms, Saber turned her body to face the White Queen, only for her jaw to drop when she saw that the woman had her eyes closed and a small bubble inflating and deflating over her nose. "Are you sleeping?" The bubble quickly popped and the vampire's eyes snapped open. "I fell asleep." Almost everyone in the room couldn't help but sweat drop as they watched the woman wipe the drool on the corner of her mouth. Arcuid quickly regained herself and smiled at the small spirit. "Avalon, if Gawain wants to join Naruto's peerage, then it's up to him to decide whether or not to accept Gawain." "Right, I suppose so. It's my decision," Naruto repeated as he looked at his queen and turned his gaze towards Asya and Rias before finally focused it on Gawain. "I don't really know what will happen to you if I reincarnate you into a devil. It's possible that the process itself could cause your angel side to fall from grace and become a fallen angel. But at the same time, my evil pieces are different from regular ones since they are fueled with light and darkness magic, so who knows what could happen. Would you be fine with that?" "Yes, no matter what happens, I will accept it," Gawain responded with determination in his voice before he looked down at his hands. "I mean, if you're fine with me being half angel, that is." Outside the room, Akeno was silently leaning against the doorframe as she listened to the conversation occurring inside. Despite what she had said before about getting tea for everyone, Akeno had a hard time moving from her spot. Every part of her being wanted to know how Naruto would react to Gawain's situation. And even now she could feel her heartbeat pounding in her chest as she awaited what Naruto would say, because if he decided to reject Gawain because of his angel blood, then I have no problem with it at all. Both Gawain and Akeno's heads perked up once they heard that, the former looking at Naruto with an odd expression as the blonde devil had a big grin on his face. "It doesn't matter to me what species you are, even if it's only 1/4. What matters to me is what kind of person you are, and from what I've seen, you are a good person. Even if you become a fallen angel, I will still accept you as my knight." "Naruto-ne-san, are you saying you'll—" "Yes, I'll reincarnate him into a devil." Glancing from his sister back towards Gawain, Naruto had a little smirk on his face. "So how about it? Ready to become a member of my peerage? I expect you to give me your absolute best, understood?" Gawain could only nod his head while Asya went to his side and hugged him, making Naruto's smirk disappear as one of his eyebrows twitch a few times. Rias let out a giggle as she placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder, while Arcuid started to laugh off to the side. Letting out a sigh, Naruto stood up from his seat and summoned one of his knight pieces to begin the ritual of reincarnating Gawain. Meanwhile, outside the room, Akeno was leaning against the door with front bangs of her hair covering her face, her body lightly trembling as she processed what Naruto had said. Flashback end, Naruto shook his head as he turned attention back to Rias and Sona, who were watching the group's interactions from a distance. Gawain's reincarnation into a devil was successful, but to everyone's surprise, Gawain's angel wings remained white, signaling that he didn't fall from grace. It had taken the rest of the time getting both Gawain and Zenovia situated at Kuoh Academy, with the former living in the Lucifer mansion with Naruto and the others. Turning his head slightly, Naruto caught sight of Akeno staring at him with a smile. That was something else that he had noticed. It seemed ever since the battle, Akeno was acting completely different now, being more forward with her teasing and other actions, not to mention the selfie she sent to him when she and Rias, "So I take it you heard about the summit coming up soon." Sona's voice spoke up, making Naruto snap out of his thoughts as he listened in on his fellow king's conversation. "Yeah, I just got the confirmation before we left our building, though Issei had informed me of it after learning it from an unexpected source," Rias replied while crossing her arms before narrowing her eyes at Naruto. "Speaking of which, when were you planning on telling me that the Governor General of the Fallen Angels was Issei's latest client?" Soon. I didn't think he would reveal himself this soon," Naruto answered with an awkward laugh as he rubbed the back of his head, which grew louder when he noticed the look Rias was giving him. "Honestly though, I would have said something if I thought he was a threat to Issei, one of the strongest leaders from an opposing faction, even stronger than Kakabeel. Has an obsession with sacred gears and you believe he's not a threat?" Rias pressed as she hardened her gaze at Naruto. "What if he tries to bring Issei to his side? Issei wouldn't leave us. You know how he feels about the fallen angels." Naruto countered quickly, surprising both Rias and Sona at the determination and faith he had in the brunette. "Besides, there's no way that pervert would leave you or Akeno if that meant that he couldn't enjoy seeing your oppai anymore." "Okay, maybe not." Rias couldn't help but sweat drop at the truth behind Naruto's words. "Anyway, leaders from the 3 factions will be coming to this region to have a meeting for the future. In addition, it is more than likely your grandmother will be involved as well." Naruto, Sona stated as she shifted the focus of the conversation back to the important matter at hand. Our three groups will have to meet up in the future to discuss future plans. Turning her head away from Naruto, Rias nodded her head at Sona's words. Agreed. The summit won't be for a while since the factions have to decide on an area that they can have it. Yeah, I guess finding neutral territory can be a serious thing when it comes to the leaders of the three factions coming together in one place. Naruto said as he heard Issei shout something from the second floor. All we can do is make sure that we are prepared for whatever happens, but until then we should just continue our normal routine. Right, Rias and Sona replied at the same time, all three of their queens nodding their heads in agreement in the background. Mind telling me why you're riding the top of my head like this? You know you're easily to spot up there. Naruto questioned as he walked down the street filled with stalls and shops, but his attention was on the black cat resting on the top of his head. The blonde male had changed his outfit from his school uniform to something a little more comfortable, and was now wearing a neon orange long-sleeved shirt with a black and white casual design jacket over it, and blue jeans with a double-wrapped belt that had a Lucifer emblem buckle. I thought you didn't want to be seen. Oh, don't be such a wet blanket, Naya. The cat responded in a lazy female voice as she rubbed her head against Naruto's scalp. There is not a lot of people that know I can turn into a cat since it's a rare ability among Nekoshus and I can easily hide my presence. So to anyone looking in our direction just thinks you're talking to a cat, pretty weird, Naya. Like you have room to say that, Kuroka. Just remember that once I get close to the others you need to hide yourself or something. Naruto warned as he thought back to earlier that day. I know, Kuroka replied dismissively as she plopped her head over Naruto's forehead. But I want some more of that sake later. And why exactly couldn't you have waited till later to ask me? Kuroka used one of her paws to bop Naruto's head, which was surprising hard despite the furry paw. Because I didn't want to. A free cat can do whatever she wants. A free cat, huh? Naruto repeated as he remembered their earlier conversation of why she killed her master, and then back to when she had checked on him after his battle with Cockabeel. To his surprise, she had actually come to see him several times since then, though he still felt like she was keeping some of her guard up around him. But still, it has to be a pain being on the run all the time. Apparently, Rias had offered to clean the school swimming pool for the student council as thanks for assisting them against Cockabeel. In exchange, both the Occult Club and Archive Club would have first dibs in swimming in the pool until the other students came. Unfortunately for Rias, who wanted to show off a new bikini she had gotten to Naruto, the latter had been requested for an assignment and wasn't able to join them. Bidding farewell to everyone before teleporting away, he heard Arcuid suggest to the others that they all go to the movies after the pool. Naruto was thankfully, the request was a simple extermination of some local demons causing havoc around a supermarket. To his surprise, Kuroka decided to make an appearance during his request in her cat form, resting herself on top of Naruto's head as he completed his request before teleporting away. By the time he had finished up and teleported back to his headquarters, the sun was already starting to set. So Naruto was certain that everyone was already making their way towards the movie theater and decided to head there himself. Naya, your hair is so soft. Decided to change the subject. Naruto could help but sweat drop at her comment. That's a weird thing for a cat to say. Isn't it usually the other way around? Well, yeah, but even my fur isn't this soft. My breasts, on the other hand, are another story, Kuroka replied with a mischievous voice. Though you should know that Alria, Naya, and I'm gonna stop you right there. Naruto quickly said with a small blush on his cheeks as he used one of his hands to reach up and brush his fingers gently across her back. This was something he read about when it came to making cats relax, and apparently it worked on cat-like beings as well. You are just one big troublemaker, huh? But it's so fun, Naya, Kuroka muttered as she enjoyed her petting. Suddenly her eyes snapped open to reveal her pupils had turned into slits. Naruto. Yeah, I know. Naruto replied as he halted his petting and shifted his gaze to the corner of his eye without turning around. Whoever they are, they're not even trying to suppress their killing intent directed at us. We should move to another location. Saber's voice was the next to speak up inside Naruto's head. I believe there are two of them, Naruto-sama, though there is something off about them. I'm sure they'll follow us wherever we go. Kuroka nodded as Naruto felt her front claws start to emerge from her paws, luckily not enough to pierce his skin. The blonde male silently moved through the crowd into one of the alleyways that led to the next street over, and just like Kuroka said, the two presences were following them. Naruto continued to lead them around until nighttime had come and they arrived at an abandoned playground. Why don't you both come out already? Interesting, so you managed to sense us. I guess the intel on you wasn't exaggerated. HMPH still looks pretty weak to me. Both Kuroka and Naruto watched as two cloaked figures landed in front of them, one of them much larger than the other in both height and girth, while the other actually seemed too thin even with the cloak. Naruto could actually feel Kuroka tense up on his head as the smaller figure reached up and pulled the hood of their cloak down to reveal a young man with shoulder-length dark green hair and dull blue eyes, wearing pince-nez glasses on the bridge of his nose. The larger figure followed suit, revealing that one of their large hands was actually metal as he reached up to his hood and pulled it back to show that it was a man with a black pointed box haircut and thick eyebrows and mustache. Let me just start by saying we aren't after you, Naruto Lucifer. The smaller man held up a hand with a smirk as he seemed to focus his attention towards Naruto's head, or more specifically, the black cat staring at them with feral eyes. It's been a long time, Kuroka. Kuroka leaped off Naruto's head and transformed back into her human form, her black kimono waving around wildly as she actually hissed at the men. Tobi, Kaku, what the hell are you two doing here? How did you even find me? Don't tell me you forgot. It was during your time with us that you gained such talent in senjutsu and yaojutsu. It is very easy for us to create a tracker for senjutsu users. Tobi's eyes narrowed as his body started to secrete demonic energy. The tracker itself isn't perfect, so it took us quite a while to find you, filthy stray. Ooh, you've certainly gotten stronger since I left. I guess all those experiments that your master performed on you bore some fruit. Oh, I'm sorry, former master. Kuroka crossed her arms with a smirk as both of them were glaring at her now. Looks like I hit a nerve, Naya. So these guys are… Naruto trailed off as he studied the angered men. The black-haired woman nodded her head to confirm what the blonde devil was starting to say. Other pieces from the peerage I was in before I killed that disgusting snake. Don't you dare insult Sutrasyame. Kaku shouted as he ripped off his cloak to reveal he was wearing a white button-down shirt that had the top buttons open to reveal his hairy, muscular torso with an open green military jacket over it and black pants. Reaching behind him, Kaku pulled out a large weapon that looked to be a cross between a claymore and an axe from his back before charging at Kuroka with a roar. Time to die, you slutty feline. Naruto tensed up as he prepared to summon Excalibur, only to duck his head down in time to dodge a blade that came at his head. The axe blade was connected to Tobi's foot as the young man soared over Naruto and landed with a spin that created sparks thanks to the blade on the bottom of his feet. Meanwhile, Kuroka back flipped away just as Kaku's axe-claymore slammed into the ground and created a giant crater around the large man, landing several yards away before creating a magical octagon-shaped seal behind her, and raised a hand up to summon 6 flaming balls of energy. This matter does not concern you, Lucifer Dono, so please don't get involved. That woman is a criminal that needs to be put down. Naruto narrowed his eyes at that before raising a hand in front of him and summoned Excalibur. Tobi smirked as he lifted his arms into a fighting pose, blades emerging from his forearms. I'll take that as a no. Well, that's fine with me anyway. I wanted to have a duel with you anyway before I killed that Kuroka. Something's off about this situation, Naruto thought to himself as he tightened his grip on Excalibur's hilt, his eyes darting to the side where Kuroka was standing across from an enraged Kyuka. Not to mention this strange feeling I'm getting from these guys. Movie theater, ara, this is strange. Akeno commented as she placed a hand on her cheek as she and Rias were standing outside the theater room waiting for Naruto to arrive. The two of them had changed out of their uniforms and were dressed in casual outfits. Akeno had changed into a blue tank top that had a blue string that looped around her neck with a creamy beige sleeveless hoodie over it and blue mid-thigh shorts that showed off her long legs. I was sure he'd be here by now. It's very possible that his request took longer than he thought. But still, normally he would let us know if that were the case, Rias replied as she glanced over at the clock hanging on the wall. The buxom redhead was wearing a sleeveless red and white striped t-shirt that filled her figure very well and white capri jeans, and hanging around her neck was a necklace that had the Gremory and Lucifer emblems on either side of the pendant. The necklace had been a present from Naruto just after the whole incident with the Excalibur fragments, one that she treasured greatly and refused to take off. Perhaps we should try and contact him, Akeno suggested while raising a hand to her cheek as a playful smile grew on her face. Such a naughty boy to keep us waiting like this. Rias made a side glance at Akeno with narrow eyes, staring at her for a few moments before speaking up. All right, I've had enough of this. What is going on, Akeno? What do you mean, Rias? the ponytailed queen replied with an innocent expression as she faced the Gremory heiress. I've been noticing some things for a while now, but I've known you for years, and until recently I brushed them off as you being your normal teasing self. Riaz started before crossing her arms under her bust. But ever since the battle with Kakabeel, you've been acting differently around Naruto-kun. I don't know what you're talking about, Riaz. Maybe you're imagining things, Akeno said with a smile as she dismissed the interrogative stare her king was giving her. Akeno, fufufu. Maybe it has to do with when you eavesdropped on us through the door after Gawain revealed his true form. Both Riaz and Akeno jumped as the voice that suddenly spoke up behind them, making them snap their heads to see Arcuid eating some popcorn from a large bucket with Len standing next to her with a handful of popcorn in her hand. The true ancestor was wearing clothes that were similar to ones that she wore when she met Naruto, except she had replaced the violet skirt for a black one. While Len was dressed in her usual black dress, only her bow did not have the two white puffballs attached to the ends. "Hey Arcuid, what are you doing out here?" Riaz shouted as she stared at the vampire in surprise at her sudden appearance. "I got bored waiting for you guys to come inside, so I came out here to check on you too. Everyone is still inside getting their food from the concession stand," Arcuid answered before turning her attention towards Akeno. "And as for you, why are you hiding things from Riaz? What are you talking about?" Riaz couldn't help but look at Akeno with a surprised look, blinking a few times as she couldn't believe that her queen actually stuttered. In the many years that she had known the violet-eyed girl, Riaz had never heard her best friend stutter before. Arcuid let out a huff before she handed the bucket of popcorn to Len before pointing her index finger at Akeno. "Come on, it should be obvious to everyone. I've seen you giving Naruto small glances, not to mention my earlier statement on you were listening in on us when Naruto and Gawain were talking. The answer is so thick I'm going to need my claws to cut it. It's not that easy for me," Akeno finally stated as she looked away from the vampire. "Akeno," Riaz spoke up in concern, raising a hand to place on Akeno's shoulder. Riaz, looking back and forth between the two girls, Arcuid nodded her head before she started to walk away with Len following after her. "All right, looks like my work here is done. Now I'm heading back in CLEN, my popcorn." The blue-haired familiar looked up from the now nearly empty bucket, Arcuid with her usual blank, before running off with the fuming vampire chasing after her. "You get back here," ignoring the chaotic noise from the chase occurring in the background. Riaz focused all of her attention on Akeno, who looked up from the ground to stare into Riaz's eyes. "I'm sorry, Riaz, but I can't," Riaz's eyes widening when she started to realize what Arcuid was saying. "No way, Akeno, do you?" Akeno didn't respond with words, only nodding her head once to answer the red-headed devil. "But how, since when?" "Since the incident with the fallen angels, no, it was before that," Akeno replied while shaking her head with a small frown. "I just didn't want to hurt either of you." "No way. This was too soon." Originally, Riaz thought that she would have had plenty of more time before she would have to deal with this kind of situation. Riaz may have told Naruto that she understood his circumstances regarding his future relationships and would accept it when it happened. But when she said that she had expected it to happen after they got married and she secured her position, but this wasn't what she had in mind. Out of all the future plans she had come up with, this wasn't something that she considered would happen. "But I can't lie to you, Riaz, not about this. The truth is," as the two stared at each other, a cloaked male figure was standing around the corner with a large, wicked grin. Two glowing yellow eyes flashing through the darkness of man's hood as he turned his gaze to the conversing girls. Meanwhile, "Okay, does anyone else think this is kinda uncomfortable to watch?" Issei asked as he, Asuya, Koneko, and Zenovia watched as Gawain and Kiba were looking away from each other in awkward silence. After they had purchased their tickets and went into the theater, they situated themselves in an ideal spot for everyone in the group to sit. Unfortunately though, Kiba and Gawain ended up sitting next to each other, and almost immediately the air turned tense around them. It's understandable. Valper did say that Gawain-senpai was an inspiration for his motives behind the Holy Sword project, Zenovia said from the other side of Issei, leaning over his shoulder to watch the two blonde swordsmen. "But wasn't that resolved after the battle?" Maito asked in curiosity as she shared some candy with Koneko. "I wish those two would just talk it out like Kiba and Zenovia did," Asuya replied worriedly as she stared at her childhood friend and fellow peerage member. "Unfortunately, it doesn't look like things are that simple," Zenovia said while turning her head away and moved her hands into a praying motion, Asuya copying her movements causing several heads to sweat drop. "Please Lord, give them streh." The sweat drops grew as they watched both of the girls clutch their heads in pain. "Asiane-chan, you know that only gives you headaches." Maito spoke up before letting out a sigh, with Koneko nodding her head in agreement. Those two are so similar to each other. I guess that comes with being raised by the church like they have. Issei commented as he looked at both of them with a mixed look of amusement and pity, until he averted his gaze as he remembered what happened at the pool earlier. Part of him was really surprised that Zenovia had decided that he would be the ideal mate to father strong children. To be so direct about wanting a child like that, it really caught me off guard. I mean, who the hell is straightforward like that? Several miles away, a certain black-haired sneezed before she dodged the claymore coming at her head. Koneko turned her head away from the girls to continue eating her treat. That's what happens when you forget you're a devil. Still funny to watch though. Huh, but you're not laughing. Maito pointed out as she pointed at Koneko's blank face, which didn't change at all as the white-haired girl shrugged her shoulders. Hey Gawain/look Kiba. The five turned their heads back towards the knights, who turned their heads to look at each other and spoke at the same time. You first. No, you go first. That is so creepy, Maito whispered while Issei nodded his head in agreement. Seeing Kiba motion for him to talk, Gawain nodded his head before he began. Kiba, I know that you must have some mixed feelings about me being here, especially since it was partly my fault that Valper even had thoughts about using children to wield holy swords. But I want you to know that if I could change anything back then, I would. You don't have to worry about that at all, Gawain. Kiba interrupted as he shook his head with a smile. What happened to me and my friends was horrible, and I hated everything to do with Excalibur and the church, but you were there when I remade my pledge to Bucho after the battle. I will use my holy demonic sword to defeat any of Ria's enemies and protect my comrades. I'm glad to see you've moved on, Gawain replied with a smile. Maybe we can have a spar in the future. It would be interesting to see how your holy demonic sword would handle against my Excalibur Galatine. Heh, don't be surprised if my sword breaks yours apart like Freed's fused Excalibur. I have my doubts on that. Watching the two former enemies now chatting it up with challenging grins, Issei couldn't help but smile himself. So far it's been a good day considering Azazel appearing before me. First I got to go see Naruto-senpai's sweet new headquarters, then some delicious oppai action with the girls wearing bikinis. I really hope Naruto-senpai doesn't find out about that last one. Finally, my friends and I get the best seats in the house for movies. Not a bad day, hum. Is something wrong, Issei? Zenovia asked as she noticed the brunette was looking around the auditorium with a confused expression. It might be nothing, but how come we're the only ones here? I mean, this movie was said to be very good, so figured that there would be more people here. Issei pointed out as he looked around the large room with a raised eyebrow. Now that I think about it, there wasn't anybody by the concession stand either. The pawn's statement caught everyone's attention as they copied his actions and looked around to see that all of the seats in the auditorium were empty except for theirs. Suddenly, a heavy pressure started to press down on the group, making them tense up in response. Maito's eyes growing wide from the killer intent in the air, which was much more than anything the young girl was used to. Gawain narrowed his eyes as he and the other knights in the group rose from their seats and drew their swords. Issei summoning his boosted gear as he and Koneko moved in front of Asya, who was holding onto a shivering Maito. Well, this is interesting. I would have figured you children be having trouble with this much killer intent and demonic energy flooding the room. A voice spoke up in amusement, making their heads snap behind them to see several cloaked figures were standing near the projector window, the light from the projector shining against their forms. But maybe your battle with Cockabeel made you all a little more tolerant to such things. Who are you guys? Issei shouted as his gauntlet's gem flashed, signaling its boost ability taking effect. So that is the famous boosted gear, making you the new Red Dragon Emperor. I must say, Ria's Gremory certainly has an interesting collection under her belt. Another voice came from the figure center figure, this one the slimmest of the opposing group. The wielder of Durandal, several sacred gear users that have various abilities from wielding a holy demonic sword to being able to heal any wound, and a little Nekomata. Koneko's eyes widened in horror after hearing that, her body starting to shake as she started to recognize the voices. And no, it can't be, you can't be here. Oh, so you remember us. The main figure reached up and pulled back his hood to reveal a man with long, unkempt ash-gray hair and onyx eyes. He wearing circular black-rimmed glasses that started to glint from the light from the projector. I suppose that makes sense. You are that murderer's little sister after all. Kabuto, the House of Bodhis. Hehe, you have no idea how long I've been waiting for this chance. Kaku chuckled as he used the blunt side of his weapon to swat away an incoming energy ball that Kuroka fired at him before leaping at the Nekomata, who only smiled as she raised her hand to point at Kaku's charging form. A frontal assault, not very smart, but then again I wouldn't expect anything less from one of Tsuruoyuri's pawns. Kuroka said as dozens of energy blasts fired from the seal behind her and headed at Kaku all at once, but the large man only smirked as he continued running straight at the energy-based attack, causing an explosion upon impact. Knowing that her attack successfully made contact, Kuroka lowered her hand a bit to study the smoke for any signs of Kaku. The smoke blew away in an instant when an unharmed Kaku emerged and continued his dash towards Kuroka at even faster speed before slashing at the black-haired woman, cutting through the left sleeve of her kimono and skin as she leaped back again. "Ha, did you really think that would work, bitch?" Kuroka didn't reply as she lifted up her sliced sleeve, examining the small cut underneath it. Bringing it close to her mouth, Kuroka gave the cut a lick and wiped off the blood in a single swipe of her tongue. "So I take it that is what's left of Tsuruoyuri's research." "That's right. Despite you never agreeing to his enhancements, Tsuruoyuri-sama was always improving his servants to serve him. My physical abilities were increased dramatically thanks to the research he left behind, not to mention the work he already did to harden my body allows me to brush of a narg." Kaku grin faded as he was hit by Kuroka's glowing claw as she closed the distance between them and slabbed him in the stomach. Kuroka golden yellow eyes shined with chilled amusement as she slowly removed her hand from his stomach and released an energy blast that pressed deep into Kaku's wound before sending him flying back. "You always had that issue of running your mouth off. Looks like I'll have to shut it for you, permanently." Damn you, Kuroka," Kaku grunted out as he slowly rose back to his feet with a large scorch mark on his stomach, his large metallic hand putting pressure on the wound to stop the bleeding. "How could you able to injure me like this with a single hit? Did you really think the enhancements done to your body would really make a difference against me?" Kuroka replied as she waving her finger around to create several magical symbols in the air. "Don't tell me you forgot that I am an expert in both senjutsu and yaojutsu. It was my magical prowess that allowed me to overpower and kill Tsuruoyuri so easily." "Heh, as if I could forget. It took both of Tsuruoyuri-sama's bishop pieces to reincarnate you." Kaku gritted his teeth as he started to reach into one of the pockets in his jacket and pulled out a syringe. "But that doesn't change the fact that with this I can. My body won't move. So you were bringing out a new toy, huh? Don't think I can allow that, Naya." Kuroka smiled as she created another large seal behind her, this time with an energy blast hovering over her head that was the size of a beach ball. "Better to put you out of your misery now." "Why can't I move?" Kaku exclaimed as he tried to move his body in order to avoid the attack Kuroka was charging up, but his body only seemed to shift less than an inch at a time. "Oh, that would be the poisonous mist I secretly injected into your body when I stabbed you. The capabilities of my different mists can do so much when they are surrounding my enemies." Bringing up her hand, Kuroka gave her fingers a lick as she gave the large man a coy look. "But being inside them makes their effects so much stronger. Right now, you're just one big target for me, Naya. Damn you, filthy bitch." Kaku roared as Kuroka released the energy blast and sent it flying at him, colliding with the larger man's wound and detonate upon impact. Kaku could only scream out in pain as the explosion overwhelmed him and slowly vaporize his body piece by piece until only his skeleton remained. But that too melted away until there was nothing left of him. "Don't compare me to a flea-ridden mutt," Kuroka said as she spun on her feet and started to walk away from the giant scorch mark behind her, but her main focus was on something else. "There was no doubt about it. It was small, but I definitely sensed senjutsu in that syringe. But how is that possible?" Kuroka narrowed her eyes before turning her attention towards the other battle occurring in the area, sparks flying into the air as Naruto and Tobi's blades clashed. Naruto kept his gaze focused on Tobi as the man used the blades on his feet to increase his speed and send a flying kick at him, only for the blonde to use Excalibur to deflect the attack and direct Tobi to soar past him. Seeing an opening, Naruto spun around quickly and slashed Excalibur across Tobi's back. But to his surprise, the dark-haired blade user seemed to shrug off the blow and used the momentum of Naruto's attack to spin himself around as the blade on his arm came close to Naruto's left eye. But the Lucifer ducked under the attack before kicking upward into the arm, only for Naruto to narrow his eyes as soon as he made contact and retreated back a few feet. "That body of his, I wasn't sure until now, but it's like fighting a robot or something," Naruto thought to himself as he watched Tobi shift back into a stance. "When my kick landed a blow on you, it felt more like I was hitting metal." "Oh, so you noticed." You see, Tsuruoyuri-sama was a scientist over everything else and he liked to do research on things that piqued his interest. and whatever he felt could be better, he improved. Toby explained with a smirk as he charged forward once again. With me, he turned my entire body into a weapon and removed my nerve system so I can't feel any pain when I fight. Which means I can't be distracted in battle. Experimenting on his own men in order to make them stronger. It's sickening. Saber's voice called out in anger as Naruto blocked another one of Toby's attacks before placing a free hand on Toby's shoulder and flipping over his opponent. This feeling I see now. Naruto muttered to himself as he landed before he sidestepped Toby's outstretched arm, tilting the angle of Excalibur and swung it up. The holy sword easily cut through the joint between Toby's arm and shoulder, causing the limb to fly off with the fountain of blood that was released. Toby clicked his teeth as he kicked one of his bladed shoes at Naruto's head, only for the blonde to block the attack and counter by cutting off the leg at the knee joint. Toby's eyes widened at this before he created some distance between them. Slouching forward a bit, Toby kept his balance on his remaining leg with ease. How did you? Your body might be customized to be a weapon, but the fact remains that it can still be injured. Most of your body seems to be replaced with metallic parts to work like any machine, Naruto explained as he held Excalibur in front of him. But just like any machine, it is the weakest areas that make it fall apart the quickest. You still have your organs and joints to connect to the rest of your body. You need those in order to operate correctly. So you figured out that much, huh? It was easy for me to do since your movements are so careless that it made things easy for me, Naruto replied as he charged forward, narrowing his eyes when he noticed Toby doing the same before spinning his armless side at Naruto, and a blade erupted from the wound. The blonde summoned a light spear to block the attack before noticing that Toby's mouth had opened even more than usual to reveal a gun barrel staring Naruto in the face. Firing several bullets at Naruto not even a foot from his head, Toby was shocked to see Naruto's fluidly dodge each one before charging forward and cut away each of Toby's remaining limbs, as well as the spring blade coming from his shoulder. The glasses-wearing man snarled as a rifle barrel emerged from his other shoulder and fired a bullet in a random direction, spinning Toby's body from the recoil until his gun was pointing at Naruto's back. But he never got the chance to fire, as several spears of light appeared around Naruto and fired at Toby, piercing him through in multiple locations that still kept him hovering above the ground despite the large amounts of blood falling to the ground underneath him. So I really was careless. I suppose you were right, Lucifer Dono, Toby said weakly as his body trembled from the burning sensation spreading throughout his body. Your body may not feel pain anymore, but that's the worst thing to take away from a person during battle, Naruto stated as he walked up to the pinned man with his sword ready, but was halted as he watched Kuroka make her way towards Toby with a serious expression on her face before she reached into one of his pockets and pulled out a syringe of some sort. So you had one too, what are these things, Naya? Kuroka questioned as she held the small object up to Toby's face. Why do I sense senjutsu coming from them? Toby let out a chuckle as he closed his eyes. That is Sutairi-sama's last project that his family continued after his death, and it's all thanks to you. All the data he got from you in regards to the capabilities of senjutsu and how to access it were all written down in his notes, and it was his brother, Oritsuki-sama, that finished that research and turned it into a formula that resides in your hand. But that's not possible. The grip Kuroka had on the small object tightened greatly as she glared at Toby. Senjutsu isn't something that can be injected into someone, and even if it could, the power would turn them into a monster. They would no longer retain their original bodies, and their minds would be clouded with hatred and negativity. Heh, and what better to kill you with than to use the power you used against us? Toby slowly opened his eyes to reveal his amusement. I suppose our secondary mission was a success, though that might have been their plan all along. Naruto and Kuroka narrowed their eyes at Toby's words before the former spoke up. Just what do you mean by that? Well, since I'm about to die, I guess I could tell you as we speak the other are attacking your friends and family, all to get their hands on you, Kuroka, and your little sister. Shiren has nothing to do with this. Everyone knows that she no longer had any connection to me and is serving the house of Gremory. Kuroka hissed as she glared at the chuckling man. As if that means anything, the important thing is that she matters a great deal to you. The satisfaction of you suffering it more thaw. Toby never got to finish his sentence as Excalibur's blade beheaded him and caused his body to explode into golden dust. Naruto turned his head away from the ruined playground to face an anxious Kuroka, who was clenching her hands so tightly that she actually shattered the capsule in her hands, causing some of it to cut her hand. The blonde silently watched as a conflicted hurricane of emotions were expressed on Kuroka's face before he grabbed her bleeding and held it up, making her turn to look at him with her now angered eyes. "Don't touch me," Kuroka shouted as she snatched her bleeding hand away from Naruto's grip, her ears drooping slightly as she held her bleeding hand close to her chest. "This is why I refuse to trust your kind, you devils are all the same." "Kuroka, Naruto started to say before closing his mouth as he had a hard time thinking of what to say. Kuroka watched as Naruto quietly looked away from her before she turned away from him. But as she started to walk away, Naruto once again grabbed her hand. The black-haired woman snapped her head back to look at Naruto and instantly swiped at his face with her free claw. But to her surprise, Naruto did nothing as her claws left 4 cut marks that went up his cheek, stopping just under his eye. She watched as he seemed to dismiss her actions as he raised his other hand and held it over her injured one. Suddenly, both of his hands started to glow and cover her hand completely. A few seconds passed, and Naruto removed his hands to reveal that the small injuries she had were completely healed. Kuroka stared at her hand in surprise before lifting her head back up to look at Naruto, who had already started to heal his cheek. "Why did you? Not all devils are the same, Kuroka. I just want to help you." Naruto finally replied as he turned to Kuroka with a grin, while the woman only stared at Naruto's smiling face with wide eyes before she watched him turn around to summon a teleportation gate. "Come on, we need to get over to the theater now. If we don't hurry, then they could be in real trouble if those guys use that serum." "Oh, why yeah." Kuroka nodded her head in agreement before creating her own magical seal. "My senjutsu will get me there quickly, so you don't need to worry about me." "All right, see you there," Naruto said before both of their seals teleported them away, leaving behind the destroyed playground behind. Back at the theater, both Akeno and Rias were covered in their magical energy as they glared at the cloaked figure, preventing them from entering the auditorium where their peerage was fighting. He had suddenly appeared in front of them after they started to sense something was wrong with the others and were about to go into the theater room. They could feel the power coming from the man before them, while the sounds of fighting could be heard coming from the room behind him. "Enough of this, tell us who you are right now and why you're attacking my servants," Rias demanded as she glared at the chuckling man. "Oh come now, Rias Gremory, the younger sister of Surzech-sama should know when to keep her cool in battle and think strategically." The cloaked man seemed to prop his head on his sleeve-covered hand, and his eyes glowed through the darkness of his cloak. "Otherwise things could end up badly for her." "Is that a threat?" Akeno questioned as she took a step closer to Rias in order to defend her if necessary. "Not at all, I am only making a statement. I wouldn't dare harm the heiress of the House of Gremory." The cloaked figure replied as he slowly pulled his hood down to reveal a snake-like man with extremely translucent-looking pale skin and curled-up black hair. He had a long face with pronounced cheekbones, golden eyes with slits in his pupils, purple markings around his eyes. "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Oritsuki Bodis. Bodis, as in one of the original 72 pillars. I thought that house was one of the ones that perished," Rias stated as she studied the man's appearance. Something about his last name was making her uneasy, though she wasn't sure why just yet. "Would you mind explaining why your group is attacking both my and my fiancé's peerages? There are not a great many of us left, unfortunately, but I assure you that we are still around. And while it was not our original intention, I can assure you, we only came here for a certain person. Which brings me to why I am here. I would like to make a request," Oritsuki said as he took a placed a hand on his hip. "Though if you decide to turn down this request, I'm afraid I won't guarantee that my group will take it positively." Rias raised an eyebrow at that. She studied the man. "Oh. And what request would that be?" "I would like for you to surrender Shiren, or should I say Koneko Taoju, to the House of Bodis for immediate execution for her and her sister's crimes against our family." Oritsuki answered with a smirk as he bowed his head a bit, enjoying the looks of shock on both Rias and Akeno's faces after hearing his demands. "You can't be serious," Rias finally said with the power of destruction now swirling around her ferociously as she returned to glaring at the man. "You are actually demanding for me to surrender my rook over to you to be executed. You must be signing your own death warrant. I guess that means you are declining then." Oritsuki let out an amused sigh as he watched lightning started to form in Akeno's hands while the power around Rias grew larger. Lifting up a hand to his face, Oritsuki used one of his fingers to pull down the lower lid of his eye. "Very well, I'll play with you too. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notification, and also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.